Welcome to the Working Mama Podcast, a show that provides real-world tips, tricks, and advice to all working mamas on how they can have a career, family, and hopefully one day break the glass ceiling. Welcome back to another episode of the Working Mama Podcast. On the podcast today, I'm speaking with Ellen Hooper. And when we were chatting, we were talking about job sharing and also then a portfolio career. These are two really big topics. So what I've done is actually split the recording into two episodes, and I'm going to release them really close to each other. So after you finish this episode, then wait or, just then go straight into the next episode. Job sharing, portfolio careers, they're really great conversations. So today's all about job sharing. And Ellen Hooper does lots of things. She's the mum of two, an executive coach, the co-founder of the Growth Collective, who specialise in workshops and training for new and emerging leaders. And also, she's, at the time of recording, the Chief People Officer at a community-owned bank, a role that she job shares. She is actually going to be stepping away from this job and going to be doing the Growth Collective full-time. So Ellen has a range of background and experience, and as you'll hear, she's also a recovering lawyer. I really hope if you're interested even a little bit in job sharing, even just about Ellen's journey as a mum and a working mum, I love this chat with Ellen, and she's got so many gems of gold. I really hope you enjoyed listening, and of course, as always, be great if you could leave a rating and review. And yeah, let's get into it. Welcome, Ellen. Welcome to the Working Mama Podcast. I'm so excited to finally have you here. We've been talking for quite a while on the gram and on LinkedIn. So thank you so much for joining.
You're so welcome. I have been really looking forward to this.
So why don't we just kick it off? Those that don't know you, how would you best describe yourself?
Oh, that's always the funny question of, which identity should we put into the room first? So I'm a mum. I've got two kids, a 2.5-year-old and an almost 6-year-old. And I'm obsessed with people and organizational dynamics and culture.
Now, what's been your career journey to date? Because I know you've not had necessarily always the traditional path, but I guess these days there's not really a traditional path, is there?
Yeah, it's a jungle gym, as Sheryl Sandberg says. Yeah, I started my career as a lawyer, as an employment lawyer, and then it became clear to me that I love studying law at uni. I really love learning, and I love the pursuit of learning that comes with a focus on law and what law means. But when I worked at a big corporate law firm, one of the great things there was that there was a lot of training and development. We used to do this thing where we would use the Myers-Briggs framework, which is a kind of personality quadrant methodology. And at the start of every training session, the facilitator would put the quadrant up on the board and then ask who was in the room and what their profiles were. And there was always this real cluster of introverted thinkers. And I was always down the bottom by myself as this extroverted feeler. And so I really deliberately made the move from employment law into HR, which was actually a harder transition than I kind of expected it to be. So I like to talk to people about it because it's a good example of how you just make the best next step, because it can be really hard to make the jump from where you are and where you want to be. And that can be really disheartening, especially when I worked a lot with HR practitioners. I thought I knew what their day jobs look like. I felt really confident in my transferable skills. But, now working in people and culture and looking to hire, it's a big risk to take on someone who's never done the job before. And I think that's often in career transitions where we face ourselves, trying to convince someone to take a chance on you for the first time you've ever done that thing is really a bit tricky. So yeah, really the transitional steps are really how I got there. So I moved in-house to an in-house legal role at the Department of Education. And that was really fun, giving legal advice to school principals, because you had to be like fast, practical, useful. My favorite story from there wasn't, I focused on employment and discrimination, but the kind of team next to me did a bit more kind of holistic work. And the best call was from the principal who went, look, we've got this magpie. These magpies keep swooping the kids. And like, so we've got these ice cream containers that they've all been putting on their heads to like cross from one building to another building. She's like, are you sure we can't kill them? So that one's, that's just so, after being like, working with mining and like big corporate, it was so fun, the kind of like really practical relationships you got. I don't know what the legal advice was in the end, and I don't know if the magpies are okay or not. But
yeah, did we get the RSPCA involved?
It would have been a genuinely really complex legal situation, but it just was that great interaction between like real lives and using your knowledge of the law in a way that was really useful. And the department I got my big break into HR. So from the legal team, someone took a chance on me and I moved into the HR team there. And then I slowly kind of moved away from the industrial relations kind of compliance parts of people and culture. So I started the employee relations team at the National Disability Insurance Agency when I was pregnant, actually. I have had a bit of an unconventional path in that I've been pretty happy to do things that the conventional wisdom would tell you not to. So I made a really deliberate decision because I was looking to move roles. And my husband and I had just started trying for our first baby. And I really went, I'm just going to put those two things on two different pathways. And if they coincide, like, what great news.
Yeah.
And if they don't, then they don't, because both things are inherently uncontrollable. I had the experience of like it taking quite a long time to find a new job that I really wanted. And then, also kind of understanding that conception is a bit of a roller coaster. And so, of course, those two things came through at the exact same time.
Yeah, as always the way that you try and think, oh, no, they're going to take ages.
Yeah. So, you got the job over 1 week, got the pregnancy test the next week. So, yeah, and I made that move, and I was really clear with the place I was going, which was the NDIS, who were, great about those things. But I do acknowledge that working in the area I do, like they literally hired me for their people and culture compliance. Like that's not the person that you discriminate against about pregnancy. So I acknowledge the privilege that comes with my skill and expertise in kind of moving through parenting and workplaces. It's definitely not everyone's experience. And I have over my career got a lot of, could you talk to my friend about being made redundant on parental leave, or, what do you think about applying for a job and trying to have a baby? And I know that the experience I have isn't the experience that lots of other people had. But that was a really great 6 months. Like they got a lot out of it. I got a lot out of it. It was really clear, the time period that I was there for. There was actually a real benefit of being able to reset expectations in a new job to just really manage the pace during pregnancy.
And that's very unusual as well.
Yeah. So I really did get to go, hey, I'm actually going at a bit of a slower pace. No one has any expectation of me and the kind of pace that I go at. And I have found that, the top tier law firm pace that I was used to, and then kind of really winding that back in the public sector, I think even at my slowest pace, I was still, I definitely wasn't moving too slowly for them. So it was a really nice fit. And so that really helped. And then after that, I also did something that unusual, which is I started a new job on returning from my parental leave. I started in that organisation, a subsidiary of Monash University, for quite a number of years. But I started there full time, and my husband took 3 months off with Oscar. And that was a really lovely transition because I got to start the new job and the return back to the workplace and just deal with all the crap that comes with that. and not have it inflated or conflated with all the crap that comes with starting childcare, because that happened later, and that was hard. But I see a lot of people, and then there's this kind of crisis of confidence of like, oh my God, I've done the wrong thing.
Yes.
And conflate together. So I got both of my kids the opportunity to like split those distinct challenges out, and so then being like quite clear what impact each of them had. And I think that's like a really useful way to do it if anyone has the opportunity to structure themselves like that. And then after I returned to work with Zoe, I kind of made the big call to go out on my own. And I had been thinking for a number of years, because I am a long-term planner, about how the hell I was going to have a kid in school and work. And I love working, and I've worked full-time up until I still work full-time, but just in a different way. And I was just kind of looking at my employment arrangement, which was it was a flexible work environment. It was a supportive work environment, but I was just like, I just don't think this is going to work. And I'd also been really driven to work in a bit of a more autonomous way. So I made the big call to go out on my own and run my own business, offering executive coaching and HR consulting. And by that stage in my career, I was set up pretty well for that. And then, of course, the twists and turns of life. One of my clients I'd been doing a lot of consulting with had a vacancy in the chief people officer role, and my business partner and I were both in there as consultants. And we just established our business, The Growth Collective, which offers leadership training for new and emerging leaders. And Bank First, where we are now, said, did either of you want to do this job? And we kind of thought about it, and we just launched this new business, and it was really in its establishment phase, but we'd really fallen in love with this organization, and particularly its executive team and its purpose and its strategy. And we're just really trying to go, and we're like, okay, we're coaches. We can work through this. Yeah. We can find a creative solution for this. And so we worked through a job share arrangement, which would let us run the business in the non-work days and let us run our business, The Growth Collective, and let us work in this executive role in a job share arrangement. So it's got a bit of uniqueness to it in that we actually in the business together, in Bank First together for 2 days out of the 3 that we both work.
That's amazing.
So 2 crossover days. And that was really important for 2 reasons. Firstly, it really matched the operational rhythm of that organization. So, there were board meetings on one of those days and exec meetings on the other. So it matched the organization, but then it also allowed us to have this 1 day off together, which is on a Monday, where we can then work in the Growth Collective together, because that was a thing that we just couldn't get our heads around. How are we going to keep our business running? And our business is really set up to run itself in a lot of ways. Like it's not kind of, for us, it's trying to break the connection we have between our time and income, which was very much what consulting was like. And that drives, all kinds of behaviors, especially, as a recovering lawyer. So that was the sticky piece that we couldn't get our heads around. But when we kind of unlocked that, hey, we could actually do 2 days at Bank First together, and then that would mean this. Yeah, that started to make it a really, really viable option. And absolute kudos to the board and the CEO that we work with, because they were like, yeah, that sounds good.
And no questions, nothing.
No, there was like, okay, we'll work through the logistics. But I was really ready to have kind of a more robust discussion about it. But I mean, I always joke that we'd just done the world's longest job interview, consulting with them for 3 to 4 months, and they'd seen how we worked together. But, and look, once again, being in the people and culture space, there's this real view of like, well, you guys are the experts in this. So if you think it's going to work, let's give it a go.
You can make it work.
Yeah.
And so just on that, how do you make your job share arrangement work? Obviously, you've got 2 days a week and you're in that role because you're the head of people and culture for Bank First. So how is it like logistically? And I know there's a lot of, people are uncertain about share. Is it going to cost more money? How does it work in terms of arrangements with communication? So how do you work? And obviously that you're in a unique position that you've also got a business together.
Yeah. Yes. Which, yeah, we always laugh that like, oh, we've entered into a work marriage. Look, so I really love getting kind of granular about the job share, and it's interesting because I've actually never worked part-time in an organization before. And I did want to add, statistically, job sharing at executive level is incredibly unusual.
Mm.
But I have had way more confused, snide, how interesting conversations at barbecues about working full-time as someone with young kids.
Wow.
Yeah. So I did want to say, this is so funny because this is a podcast about flexible work. But, the traditional family in Australia right now, the Australian Institute of Family Studies research and the census, I think as well, had the same result, which is there's a mum that works 3 days a week, and there's a dad that works full time, and there's a mum that takes the parental leave and for 12 months, and there's a dad who takes 2 weeks. So that's your kind of traditional family structure. And working full time, it was always so much easier. And there's great reasons to work part-time. And we have lots of people on our team who work part-time. This sounds like, all my friends work part-time. But, I'm really supportive of and an advocate for flexible work. But I do wonder if there's maybe a few people listening to this who have just never considered full-time as an option. Because I do think that it's very socially expected that you'll have a baby and you'll enter into this part-time arrangement. And workplaces aren't doing a really good job of that.
No.
Of design flexible work. And I like to use the project management philosophy to designing flexible work, which is think that your role is just a set of duties that someone has made up at some point. And working in people and culture, I get to see how organizational structures are just genuinely like a figment of our imagination because we change them all the time. And so if your role is just a set of duties, then with any project that you manage, you have time and you have scope and you have resources. So if that role used to be 40 hours a week and now it's 30, like what are you doing with that other 10 hours?
Yeah.
Especially there's money there. So is that consulting? Is that admin support? Like what is that? Where's that money going? Is it job share? And there's lots of different ways to job share, including getting someone junior to step into that role on the day that you're not there. Is it timing? Are we going to look at what we do for the next 12 months and we're going to slow things down? Or is it scoping? Are we actually going to pull a few duties out of here and either not do them or reallocate them somewhere else? Because the kind of cultural vibe that you should be so grateful to be paid 40% less and work the same amount of hours. We just have to stop putting up with that bullshit.
Yeah, it's actually crazy. It's funny how, at the moment, I work corporately 3 days a week, increasing that to 4 days next year, because I'm just I'm trying to fit a 5-day role. So I was on mat leave. There was someone full-time doing my role and probably not even still doing it, just because I've been in the company for a while.
Yeah.
And what he was doing in 5 days, I then came back and did 3, but for exactly the same amount of money.
Yeah. And we've got to really look at role design and structure. But anyway, the job share.
Yeah.
So the intricacies of the job share. So there's a few different things that are really useful. First is how are you going to work together? And what are the expectations of you as a team? Are you meant to be this seamless human that knows everything? Am I meant to know everything that anyone's ever said to Michelle or not? Because if that's the expectation, a lot of time goes into handover and information sharing. And we've been really unpacking that assumption ourselves recently. But I really recommend being clear about what the expectations are and kind of putting a recommendation about, hey, this is how we're going to work it. I recommend working across the job instead of kind of trying to split out everything from a task perspective between you. I think there needs to be some sort of fluidity. We do that in some really practical, tactical ways. So we use Teams in our organization, but, Slack, other Google Drive or other things will be able to support with this. But we have a Teams or Trello. We have a Teams board that just has like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday on it.
Yep.
And put in there what's the urgent thing that has to get closed out on that day. And of course, you like just move little boxes around.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of, you look at that and you go, okay, that's the one thing that I'm responsible for progressing today. And being really disciplined about that, because it's easy to, everything's important, but what's urgent?
Most critical. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing we started doing, which has been really useful, is now we also have another board that has each of the team members' names on it and the things that we've delegated to them.
Yep.
And that really helps us keep track of like things going out into the ether and making sure that they come back. So that's really useful. Calendar management's really important. And I do think a job share role really, really benefits from some administrative support with managing a diary. We've got some good flow. So there's always like half an hour handover meetings in each of the transition dates. And that leads me to the next thing we do, which is we actually have someone in our team who acts in our role on the Monday.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And that for us was a really important talent management benefit. So we specifically recruited someone and we wouldn't have been able to secure him. Sorry, that's such a hard HR way to talk about people, isn't it? We wouldn't have been able to recruit him without access to this, higher duties that he gets to do once a week. And so he's built into our flows as well in that. So he does the Monday. So on the Friday, I make sure we spend half an hour together at the end of the day going, this is what I'm seeing might come up. And these are things I need you to access. He has access to our like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday board as well. And then when we're both back in on the Tuesday, we have a half an hour handover with him about what happened yesterday. What do we need to know? And then the other thing we're getting better at is not duplicating at meetings. So executive board and our team stand up once a week is where we duplicate. And then we try not to duplicate in anything else. And that's been a bit of a discipline that we're still working on. And it wasn't, when we first started the role, there's so much information gathering that we did spend a bit of duplicative time. And that question you asked at the start, Karina, about, you do pay more for these roles. Like this is a 1.2 FTE. We're working with an organization that's going through a transformation. And I think the one benefit that's really unique, specific to that transformation is like the mental load that we can carry across two of us is actually quite expanded.
Yeah. There's not just that full time and what you get you're getting so much more. And do you both have different skill sets?
Yeah. So that's the other thing that we really get is this kind of almost unicorn of skill sets mixed together. So I've got this legal background that is incredibly useful from time to time. I always joke that means I get the shitty work. I get a lot of OHS questions. And then Michelle's got, this deep culture background, but she also has 20 years in financial services. So you can't, like in this particular job, you put those two things together and there's not a heap of people available in the market that have both of those things.
Yeah.
And then you get different perspectives. Yeah. Which is interesting. So I want to talk a bit about leading the team now across two people.
Mm.
And we're a bit trial and error in this. And those different perspectives, I think, can be a source of frustration to the team. But we really frame it, and I think it is true for them, which is, so normally what happens in people and culture is like you do some work, and because you, in a support function, almost all of your work has this organizational lens across it. So it's really common that, the function does a lot of work and then you kind of push it up to the executive team, which of course then you have like 10 different perspectives.
Yeah.
So we like to work with them on, hey, getting our two different perspectives, which we really work on as being a build, not a conflict. we're very aligned in our philosophy about people and culture and about leadership specifically. It's just an opportunity to like grow your skills in an expanded way, but also get this perspective now rather than at
On the track
level.
Yeah.
Look, which is people know what they've signed up for, but I think like anything that our team would find that to be beneficial on some day and deeply frustrating on another day. We have actually, now the thing that really always stuffs you up in job share is like the systems can't handle it. So like there's only one person who can be the contract owner and there's only one person in the performance management system who can approve the leave and, there's so what we've done from a leadership perspective is we've actually had divided the direct reporting for the purpose of that formal stuff. So for the one-on-ones, for the performance reviews, but being really clear that we work across the team. So the team will work with us on different things. I reckon for me, that's a watch area of like, I don't know if that is the best way to do it. It's got clarity to it. It's got a lack of duplication, but we're actually wondering if maybe in the next cycle we might swap.
Yeah.
Because of course it does mean you have more visibility over a certain part.
Yeah. And then that way you can actually see the whole team as what you said, you're working across the whole company.
Yeah. So that is tricky. I can see other ways, which is where you like alternate kind of week on, week off. You could do that stuff together. I think that would potentially really eat into your available time. And we've got a really high performing, really engaged, really capable team. So that means that's not where we need to put deep time. But yeah, that's how we run it. And the other key thing about working together, which we had a real leg up in because with the work that we do, we have each done like 7, 8 different personality profiling tools across our careers. And we've actually trained in like 3 of them together. So we had this really shortcut knowledge of each other's preferences.
Yeah.
And we're actually very complementary in our preferences. So that's a huge benefit for solving problems because of unique perspectives, but it's also got like high risk for conflict. So we're pretty well practiced in really acknowledging and being clear about the thing that the other person brings. But I would really recommend job share partners do some sort of, it doesn't matter which one, but do a profiling tool, understand your own result, and then really work through what does that mean together. Like ideally with a coach or a debriefer, because it will just tell you your watch outs.
Yeah, and actually see it.
Yeah, and for us, pace is a really big thing. Like I'm very like quick and decisive in my decision making and action oriented, and Michelle's very considered and reflective. And of course, I get to a really good result. But that there can be tension in that.
Yeah.
And that's just like, there'll be 100 of different examples in different partnership arrangements, but those are things where you really want to think of, I really need to think of her reflective consideration as being such a benefit to our partnership and to the team. Because those are the things that are really easy to be frustrated by.
Yeah. But if you're aware of it, you then know how to manage it.
Yeah, absolutely.
How did you both find each other? Because sometimes in a job share arrangement, people said, I'd love to do a job share, but I can't find anyone. How did you two come across each other to then form that, I guess, both a business relationship and also then a working relationship?
Yeah, we worked together previously and not in a traditional job share arrangement, but in kind of equivalent seniority, if you put it like that, because I was running a team and I had said to my boss, I really need help with the learning side because I don't have deep expertise in learning, and it was part of the remit. And so we brought in this consultant. It was Michelle. So that's where we met. I don't know. I'm kind of curious obviously knowing each other deeply has really worked for us. And I know lots of people have the perspective that that's necessary. and there's huge benefits to it. But I don't know that it is. I kind of bust that open a little bit. But and like every role's got a different unique thing that it needs.
Yeah.
And even the idea that lots of people have that you have to be at the same skill level, it just depends. I mean, I can see that being true for some roles. And what you always want to avoid in job share, whether it's because of style, philosophy, values, or skill, that I call it, what do I call it? Advice shopping. You want to avoid a situation where there's such a marked difference that people will wait for the next day to get what they need. But you can, especially in the 4-day, 1-day dynamic, you can definitely partner with someone who's not at the same level of skill as you, like really seeing that as the development opportunity. I've got a really good friend who does this brilliantly. She rotates that every 6 weeks in the team.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's this real benefit to the team. It's long enough that it's useful and, that she gets really good coverage, but it's this really great breeding ground for talent. Yeah. So there's lots of different ways to do it. And, if you do have, I think it's always about kind of giving it a go. I mean, it's funny. Lots of the public sector is like, well, we've only got the cash for the 3 days a week. So that's what it is.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's about any part-time or flexible, anything that's not full-time. The key thing is like the coverage. What is going to happen on that non-work day? Because if there isn't a good plan for that, you're really being set up to fail. And I think that people who want to work flexibly can be really involved in creating what that is. I don't know that an organisation's going to kind of be really good at solving that problem for you. You're probably best placed to do it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of expectations. Sometimes we think, the employers or the organisation's going to have the answer, where sometimes they don't really know themselves and they may be even navigating it for the first time. So if you come up with, like you've done, come up with a proposal, come up with a suggestion, probably 9 times out of 10, they'll actually endorse what you're proposing because they don't know any better and they may not have had the experience either.
Yeah. And unless you've got, teams of people where you've got lots of people doing the same role, it's kind of typical in organizations that no one really knows the absolute nitty gritty of your role except for you.
Yeah.
And so I've talked to people who've had very successful job share arrangements, having never worked together previously. I would do 2 things with that. I'd probably have a time frame on that. Like, is that a 12-month arrangement? Is that like, what does that look like? And, or alternatively, or both, also have a review period. So let's look at that every 3 months and then be clear, what are we going to ask ourselves in the review period? It's the prenup kind of idea, which is, hey, let's be clear about these things when we're both thinking well of each other.
Yeah.
And not under stress. And then who are the key stakeholders in that review?
Yeah.
How's your leader's experience of it? How does your team experience it? How do your stakeholders experience it? Yeah. And if things aren't working perfectly, which is really normal, like the other thing I always put a nice lens on is like, what would this look like if there was just one person in this role?
Yeah.
Like there's plenty of single people who are not working perfectly.
Yeah.
And have feedback that, should be given and tweaks to make in terms of how they're showing up and, walking through an organization. So that can be really, sometimes if I'm ever in my head about like, are we meeting the standards and what should I do here? Thinking about, well, what would happen if one person was in this role can be a really good frame to be like, oh yeah, that's like people go and leave.
Yeah.
Because I think there's often this kind of like, oh, should you cover each other, or what's going to happen when, one of you takes leave and it's like, no, just a normal person would just go and leave and there would be a gap and we would just deal with it like that.
Yeah.
So,
and what's been the feedback like from your CEO and your board? So obviously this is probably one of the very first times that they've done this in such a senior leadership role as well. Has the feedback been quite positive, and has it then rolled out into other parts of the organisation as well? Like, have you seen an increase in job share because of what you're role modeling in the organisation?
That's a really good question. It's interesting. We don't get a lot of feedback about the arrangement very often, which is, I think, a good sign.
That's a positive. Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, if you're hearing lots, then it means something.
Yes. There's definitely like different people have, this is a classic part-time thing, which is like, I can't remember what your work days are.
Yeah.
So based on that feedback, we did start just dropping into Teams to be like, I'm in today. Shannon's on Monday. Like I think once people know that contemporaneously, and it's the thing about just kind of continuing to do the same thing and getting the same results. So we could have been like, oh, it's on the email signature and we've told you.
But no one ever looks at that email.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Like, you get a bit of amnesia about, if I had a staff member going on leave and she'd been very clear about it, and we talked about it heaps, and the day before I was like, oh my God, you're going on leave tomorrow. Just like, we're kind of mostly thinking about ourselves most of the time. So that had been a good piece of feedback about, can you help us with that a bit more? We have been watching for advice shopping. Like, we always laugh that you'll get the same answer from both of us, but like Michelle will make you feel better during the post, and so we do watch for that and talk quite openly with our colleagues about that and that dynamic. We just had a board member the other day say to us, I've never seen two people like work so kind of seamlessly together. And you could definitely credit that to the length of time that we spent together, which is, in the scheme of a career, it's not that extensive. We've probably known each other for about 4 years. This is not a lifetime of working together. And I do really credit that far more to the work we've done on personality and preference profiling.
So you've got to know each other at a deeper level. What makes you tick rather than just at a surface level and understanding it.
Look, and it makes sense as well that that's board feedback, because the board arena is where the topic, it's part of the role to prepare for it. So, sometimes you get some killer questions, but it tends not to be. I don't know that our executive colleagues would feel that same way, because they will tend to put things into the room that we've never talked about before. So they probably get more of the like, oh, do you think that? I would kind of look at it like this. And the other thing that I think was really interesting, which was, I think came from our attempt to, when we started kind of assuming that there was this expectation that we'd be this like seamless human being. There was some feedback of like, hey, sometimes you guys like it's like you speak a secret language. Yeah. Because we'll be like, do you want to, and don't forget, like it is, because we're pretty tapped into each other now. And so there was like, it was really interesting. It's like, could you actually tell us what it is that's going through your mind? Because it would help us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, oh, because I'd really been doing that to be like, because there's something about there's two of you, like, don't take up too much space, don't contradict each other, like all of these things that kind of comes from that assumption that you are meant to be like one person, kind of forgetting that the magic comes from the different perspectives and experiences. Yeah. So that's something that's been subtle, but we've been thinking about and working on.
Well, it sounds like it's going really successful at the moment. So it's an arrangement that's working. So is there anything you want to add just a little bit more on job share we may not have already covered?
No, that's something I love talking about. So thank you so much for the opportunity to do that. I hope someone, as long as one person's found it helpful, that'll be enough.
That's my philosophy with this whole podcast. As long as it's helped one other person and do it. And I think definitely around job share, I think you've definitely demystified a lot of what people think about it and some of those challenges of how am I going to make it work and that seamlessness and things like that. You've definitely given a different viewpoint on how you can make it work, and then some amazing tips and strategies. And then around the portfolio career, definitely the advantages and the benefits that certainly come from it. So, Ellen, how can people get in touch with you in one of your many different hats that you wear?
Yeah, excellent. So please connect on LinkedIn. I am relatively active on LinkedIn, so I like to share my thoughts there. And also, so Ellen Hooper, and then on Instagram at Ellen ellie.hooper.consulting, I think. And then the shameless plug, because we should all get better at promoting our things. Please check out www.growthcollective.com.au. We have 2 awesome programs there, a strategic communications for emerging leaders program and a leadership fundamentals program that we run in person and virtually. So particularly we hear, Karina and I were just talking the other day, there's so many of you that return from parental leave into your first leadership role. And that's kind of like the childcare return to everything I was talking to before. It's a new layer of complexity. So if that's you, come and get your employer to pay for you to come and join our program so you can feel really solid with those skills as you move through your leadership journey.
Yes, definitely. Communication is a big part of that. And I think also, as what you said earlier around knowing your purpose and how that certainly aligns to the organization is a really big thing as well. So sounds like an amazing program, which, the more support you can get definitely as a new and emerging leader, it gives you, just like I say, with returning back to work, the more support you can have, it's that platform for success, and same with leadership. So yeah, fantastic.
And Karina, I've just remembered that I've got the How to Make Part-Time Work Actually Work article.
You do, and I'm going to put that in the show notes. So yes, it's a fantastic article, and you talk about your project management philosophy in that, definitely around the output of hours. So we will link to that in the show notes.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the Working Mama podcast. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast catcher. I invite you also to join the Working Mama community on Facebook and join in the conversation with other like-minded working mums. Please also feel free to contact me on any of the Working Mama social channels. Remember, Mama is MUMMA, or website www.workingmama.com.au. I would appreciate you to share this podcast with friends and colleagues, especially those that are parents managing the juggle. And I would really appreciate if you had to take the time out to leave a review of the podcast. I'll be giving a shout out to select people that do so stay listening and you might be one of them. Thank you and see you next time. Have a great week.